Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. And yeah, the Avatar Studios news continues to keep coming out. What started out as just a big official widespread news piece about just 3 untitled movies are coming out. Director confirmed, mostly stuff we had already known before, has suddenly gone from that to having all this extra insider information and details revealed about it. So we seemingly have a lot of the really obvious information confirmed, which we'll get to. But first, an update on the piece of concept art that was shown at the Annecy Film Festival. So the description again was that it was a shot of what looked like a walled city with a giant tower in the middle, with the caption "The Avatar Returns" and a symbol for Earth. Obviously got people talking, and I think everyone was leaning either down the direction of yeah, this is probably either Kyoshi or Earth Avatar after Korra, depending on what they do. He then came out and said, I'm almost sure what we saw was General Fong's fortress, just FYI, and he posted 2 screenshots from, I guess, 201, showing it, and yep, there's a walled fortress and or city fortress with a tower in the middle. So obviously he went out looking for locations that matched what he saw, and he's pretty sure that this is, this. Now what does that mean? I don't want to get too much into speculation because I think the news that's next kind of in a way leads us to know what exactly is kind of maybe happening. But the important thing to realize is that, okay, it's General Fong's fortress in that era, but the fortress has obviously been around for quite a bit longer than that. And then the other thing important thing to kind of realize about it is that look at the walls that are kind of connected to it. There's a whole wall that goes up and over the mountain this way. There's a wall that goes this way, a wall that goes that way. It's clearly part of a defensive network of bases. So it might not necessarily be exactly the fortress that we saw in that episode, but it might be maybe one of them. So you just have to keep that in mind, that maybe based on what he saw, the landscape behind it matches as well, and so it is exactly this one. But it's interesting just to know that, okay, fortress, so it could be this fortress or another one that looks like it, given that it looks like it's a network. Now, the big news. You can see it here, Avatar news. He teased that he would have some Avatar Studios news as well as some live action news, and he has put out the Avatar Studios news. It says it right here. This is basically the kind of core of the news with all the kind of nuance taken out of it. Kyoshi movie will be the first one for 2024. The second one will be a Zuko movie. That will be in 2025. And the Korra movie will be the third one, and that will be in 2026. So the important thing to realize here is that this is not just one person speculating and just being hey, it'd be cool if this was the way it worked out. No, there are enough pieces of insider information, at least that Avatar News has access to, that he was able to sort of cross-reference a few things and pretty much piece this all together. So we know a Kyoshi movie was rumored. Grace Randolph teased this. Both Avatar News and Grace Randolph previously teased that there was going to be a prequel movie, but that they couldn't say who the character was. So that now gets confirmed as Kyoshi. The thing we didn't know was that the Kyoshi movie was going to be the first movie. So this is interesting. It confirms, okay, the Lar Montgomery first Avatar Studios movie will be Kyoshi movie in 2024. We'll get to speculating about this a little bit later, because again, there's no plot details of any of these in here. Literally just, this is what each movie looks to be about, and literally just from a character perspective. The second movie, Zuko movie, this was again, Avatar News had teased this before, last month, that, from what he heard, is that one of the movies is a Zuko-focused movie. Again, we don't know where exactly it's set, but everything about the character would suggest that it is, at the very least, post-series, but it could very well also be post all of the comics that we know about as well. This feels like a great opportunity to do the older ATLA movie, but your focus character is actually more Zuko rather than Aang, but I assume Aang will still be in this one as well. because if there's a big enough incident for Zuko to get involved with, it seems like Aang would play a role as well, especially when, you know, United Republic, Republic City is probably somewhere in there depending on when it's set. So this makes a lot of sense as well. They had to do an ATLA movie at some point to fill in the gaps, but it's interesting that it's not the first one. It shows, I suppose, a lot of confidence that they clearly have in Kyoshi, that this is the first one, it's the one they want to put out first, and especially because they don't have any sort of like history in the cinemas with like animated Avatar. So it speaks to a lot of confidence that they're willing to let Kyoshi, the sort of new fandom star from the last couple of years because of the novels, take the lead here. Especially when like we have information that suggests that like a very small fraction of the fan base has read the Kyoshi novels, and that's of the fan base. So if you talk about from a broader perspective of just anyone who knows about Avatar, it's probably even less that know about the Kyoshi novels. So a lot of this is going to rely on just those few moments with Kyoshi in the show, if they're enough for people to go out to the cinema to see this movie. Now, once the trailers start to hit and the marketing cycle begins for this, you know, people are going to be drawn in by like good animation. I assume they have a good story and just the return of Avatar as a movie. Like all these things will come together to, I think, make it popular, but just interesting that they're not going for what feels like the go-to moneymaker movie, which would be the, you know, older ATLA crew movie. Now, Korra. So this is the one we had no tease about before. Now, I think it was pretty obvious that like they were going to do a project about pretty much everything as Avatar Studios went on. There are movies, series, spin-off series, short-form content planned. Korra was going to get something eventually. Even if it wasn't part of this first trilogy, it would have got something eventually. But I think it's a very good move to, in this first trio of movies, which seems to be the big thing that they're going for, that potentially Avatar Studios will either start off with 3 movies, or it'll be 3 movies with maybe some short-form content in between them. We don't really know how that's all going to work. I think it's a good move to basically have your lineup be the 3 pillars of the franchise. An ATLA movie, a Korra movie, and then Kyoshi has absolutely become probably the third most interesting like aspect of the franchise because of those novels. So this shows that I think they are in tune with the fandom, that the creators are doing the movies that they know the fans will want to see. Because there could have been a weird lineup of movies where it's kind of like, why are you telling that? Why are you telling that when you could be telling this? Like, if this was just 3 movies about kind of 3 new avatars, there'd still be excitement. Absolutely, there would still be excitement. But because there's been such a demand over the years for continuation of both series, people demanding more Kyoshi, like a 3rd novel, absolutely people will be asking for a project about Kyoshi. So this shows that, like, okay, they're willing to kind of do what it felt like they maybe weren't willing to do during Korra. Like during Korra, they talked about how we wanted to do something different and not just do the direct continuation of ATLA. Now they sort of are aware that there's enough of demand, it's been long enough, that they kind of need to do that, to answer those questions and just, in a way, stop those questions so we can move on to something new later in either the next wave of movies or the series or stuff like that. And that's the other factor here, is that they have TV series which can just be released digitally on Paramount Plus that can be the ones that are doing the new stuff. So brand new Avatar, or maybe an Avatar who we know about but isn't quite as popular as Kyoshi. You can do a series, a spin-off, short form content about that Avatar on Paramount Plus. But they maybe are aware that, at least right now, from the movie perspective, they need to have the faces of the franchise to be the movie stars. That sort of thing. It makes sense. So we'll go through the article a little bit here, but I think in what I talked about there, it's most of what was talked about. I finally compiled, confirmed, and cross-referenced enough sources to feel confident in posting what Avatar Studios' first 3 movies are about, in what order, and with a big grain of salt, okay, when they're coming. So, again, it's he's putting together a couple of different sources that he has access to. So that's the important thing to realize here, is that this isn't just someone heard a wild rumor and it's now getting reported as being the case. No, there's a few things lining up here to where this feels like it's happening. And given that this is coming shortly after actual official information came out confirming that there was a third movie, and that they're basically, I guess, just about ready to confirm some details, it would make sense that people behind the scenes know those details ahead of time. So, timing-wise, this makes sense as well. So, going over the news that was directly full-on confirmed, he also goes over what I just went over there on Twitter as well. So yeah, the first animated movie is a prequel. It's the prequel, and it is Avatar Kyoshi. Second movie is the Fire Lord Zuko focused movie, and then the last one is set in the era of Avatar Korra after the end of the series. He does say, these are all high-level descriptions. He doesn't know the focus of the Korra movie, but he'd be willing to bet it's on Korra herself. And again, it makes sense. With Korra specifically, I'm not sure that there's that many other characters who could be the lead in a Korra movie. Like, I'm not sure Korra necessarily has its own Zuko, where you can absolutely have this character be the focus, with Korra only being like a side kind of plot in this. Again, for hardcore fans, we'd be willing to accept, I think, a lot of characters as the lead of a Korra-focused movie. But for a movie that's going to come out to the cinema, I think you need Korra to be in the spotlight. So that is that. He specifically knows that the Zuko movie is, I suppose, focused on Zuko, which is quite interesting. That it's not just some sort of a thing where, like, Zuko means General ATLA, but that the story will be more about Zuko than Aang, I guess. And then he doesn't know that the Kyoshi movie will star Kyoshi, but the whole point of that era is Kyoshi, so like it has to be Kyoshi. They're definitely gonna, I think, focus these on like the avatars, and that Aang will be in the Zuko movie. I'm convinced of that at the very least. The dates, he did debate whether we wanted to put them in here or not, but they're not just random estimates. They are info from these sources, cross-referenced, and so here we go. Animated movies coming to theaters once a year starting in 2024, with the first 3 being Kyoshi, Zuko, Korra. So again, they're not the movie's titles and so on. His estimate, this is just speculation, late 2024. And again, this makes sense, just with how slow things have been. It's kind of difficult to feel that, no, this is early 24. Like, I don't think anyone's really thinking that if we potentially get information confirmed at Comic-Con, we're probably expecting a 2024 date. That makes sense. So, this is all, I think, lining up relatively well. And again, because they're working on their own animation style, that, again, for anyone who maybe has missed this, is that they're planning to use a sort of combination 2D, 3D animation style that I guess is going to take advantages of the sort of ease of production, the kind of time saving aspects of 3D animation, but still having the aesthetic and, look, legacy of the 2D animation. And I think, especially with Brian being on board, he's more the art guy of the two. I don't think he would be happy if they were forced to just use 3D and an animation style he wasn't happy with. They're going to make sure that this style that they're using allows them to efficiently put out content while still looking like Avatar. We have to wait and see, of course, but I think there's a reason they're developing this kind of new art style, and that it's so that it can be the trademark Avatar style going forward, and make it so that they can hit this schedule that looks rather crazy. because it means that like if they're potentially going for like late 2024 for the first one, they have only like exactly a year to put out the next one. And again, maybe they're doing it in groups of threes. Maybe they're doing a little bit of a Dragon Prince on this, where all three of these movies are actually being worked on at the same time. Pre-production on all three will be done, and so this is how they can actually make that all happen. But we'll have to wait and see. It is interesting that it is all movies. Like there's no information recently about series, even though that's what like the early information was about. All different types of projects. So that will be an interesting one to see in terms of like if they make any statement on, okay, are we just doing movies for like the first like 5 years or something like that? Like when will the first like series be? Because I'm assuming they're not just going to scrap that, and that Avatar will now be an animated movie franchise. That'll be fine for a while, but I think we'll ultimately want more like longer form stuff. Because again, you know, each movie you have to think is maybe like a 5-6 episode arc, like half a season in a way of content, if even that. So we'll still be wanting sort of like a 12 episode series, 20 episode series type thing eventually. But like I said, I think that'll be for maybe like new avatars, and they'll use that there, and then the characters who are super popular will get a movie. So for instance, Yang Chen novel out in like a month exactly. In a couple of years, maybe Yang Chen will be super popular, and they'll be thinking like, okay, Yang Chen worked in the books, let's do a Yang Chen movie to do the next stage of her story. You can sort of see how this is maybe all going to work. So I do like that it feels like things are coming together. And again, he just confirms these are the current plans. They're not announced. They're not confirmed. You know, they're not confirmed just yet. They haven't even revealed it yet, or confirmed anything. But it's just nice to know this information. And I think the fact that they did put out something to some people, at the very least, means they have locked in what this first project at the very least is. And from a fan perspective, I think that's all we want to know. We want Avatar Studios to be more than just this thing that will be good a long time in the future. We want to actually know a specific thing that we can look forward to in a reasonable amount of time. And all we're wanting, in my mind, is just an announcement of this is what the first movie is. This is the title of it, and some visual to go along with it. So, where we are now, I think I would be a little bit disappointed if they just at San Diego Comic-Con showed whatever this concept art is that they saw here. Because this doesn't seem like a lot. This seems like a very vague concept art, especially if it's for a Kyoshi movie. So I do think if they're maybe building up to doing something at Comic-Con, it needs to be more than just that one visual. I think they need that, and they probably need to show off like Kyoshi, like art for Kyoshi and maybe another character at the very least. But I'd also be leaning more in the direction of that because Avatar Studios is this plan for multiple projects. They probably need to go into detail on this and actually tell us what the plan is in a broader sense. Because you're teasing that this is what Avatar Studios is. It's allowing you to do multiple projects on the go at the same time, and have this sort of, you know, production facility almost for the Avatar content. Bring it up to speed on that. Don't just have it be one at a time. No, make it clear that, okay, for anyone who's maybe a little bit disappointed that it's Kyoshi first and not anything else, the second one's going to be Avatar. And then if there's Korra fans out there who are disappointed, let's confirm the third one is Korra. I do think they need to, when they finally come out and confirm this to fans, is to actually talk about their plan in a little bit more detail. And that's all I want. I'm not asking for them to have like a full-on trailer or the episodes to air at Comic-Con. I just like the bare minimum of information I think is needed at this point. Because it's exciting when you see even the sort of kind of rumored, like kind of half confirmed information like this. And like just knowing that like, wow, when we get to 2024, just that idea that it'll be boom, boom, boom. 3 movies in like 2 years basically. Because like Kyoshi will hit, we have a movie, a year, second movie, a year, third movie. That sounds incredible. And then somewhere in the middle of this, we'll be finding out about what's next. That's what's very exciting about this overall. So, what do we go into now? I suppose basic speculation about each of these. Kyoshi. Will they do an adaptation of the novels? I don't think they can do both novels in one movie. That's way too much. Because borderline, you would probably need multiple movies for either of the novels. But if this is the direction they're going in, I think they could definitely do an adaptation of Rise and have it be pretty solid in a movie timeline. But my general impression and thoughts have always been on adaptations, because people have asked about it since the comics novels have started, is that I don't really think Mike and Brian, as creators, necessarily want to do adaptations. Now, maybe Avatar Studios existing and having the ability to do so many projects might change that, in that an origin movie for Kyoshi feels like ideal for a movie as a way to interest more people than just the hardcore fans. But if you are doing an adaptation, you then suddenly bring on board the idea of comparison to the source material and frustrating hardcore fans because it's not exactly the same, and changes will be viewed quite badly, especially in this case when it will be an adaptation of a relatively recent piece of media. This is not like the Netflix live action thing where they're doing an adaptation like 15 plus years on. This is a book from just a couple years ago. So they might invite that on, and that might not be what they want. Let's say they're not doing an adaptation. Will this be where we sort of continue the novel? So a potential third Kyoshi novel is actually just this movie. What do they do next? My thoughts on that have always been that I think they should probably lean towards Kyoshi sort of meeting the Earth King and starting that dynamic. And that there's some sort of an issue. You can even do it that because Kyoshi's relatively young still at the end of the end of Shadow of Kyoshi. You could do a thing where the king that she meets is not the same king as the one she like encounters a little bit later on in her life, with the peasant uprising and all that sort of stuff. Like, because she lives so long, she effectively could go through like 3 or 4 different Earth Kings' reigns. So there's an option to do a variety of things like that. But in this case, it seems like there's actually a little bit to go on because of this kind of concept art. What does this fortress have to do with Kyoshi? So this fortress, which we know about from Aang's era, it's still up, but now we're going like pre-war. What's going on here? I could maybe see them doing a thing where this is like freshly built. It's like just been built. This sort of defensive network in the Earth Kingdom has maybe just gone up, and Kyoshi has to go into like, why have the Earth King over the last few years put such effort into shoring up their defenses? And specifically the defenses very close to the Fire Nation, because that's the significance about this location, is that it's very close to the Fire Nation. So might this be a thing where, like, we know on the other side of things, the Fire Lord is beginning to get into that ambitious Fire Lord style of things and beginning to maybe think that, like, okay, do we need to spread things? So it's almost the early stages of the Fire Nation planning their attack. What if in response to that, this is the Earth King deciding that, okay, let's defend, but let's also set up fortifications close to the Fire Nation so that we can attack, maybe. And because the Fire Nation is going to take a couple of generations to get ready for their big attack, they could be vulnerable in the meantime. And maybe this is some sort of a cool thing where they have like Kyoshi having to maybe stop the Earth King wanting to attack the Fire Nation because what he perceives as like the Fire Nation getting ready to attack them. Otherwise, I'm not entirely sure what the plot of a movie that might be Kyoshi and a fortress is really about. Because, of course, we're so far removed from the events of 201, the episode with General Fong. So the fortress itself and its significance, why it was made in the first place, probably is more of what's going on here. Now, we could be reading way too much into this. It might be not exactly what this guy is like maybe suggesting it is. There might be some other details in the background that fans might read into that maybe he's not quite. So we don't know necessarily about that. And then, like I said, it might not even be the same fortress. It might be like another one further up the wall or something like that. So there's a few, different options like that. And then maybe it's just this thing where like they just showed a generic background shot of the Earth Kingdom and it wasn't really meant to mean anything. It was just symbol for Earth Kingdom background, Avatar returns, and it's not meant to say anything. It's the most basic of basic teasers, and it doesn't say anything. There's always that room for that to happen. Zuko movie. Obviously, in terms of an adaptation, The Search. If you are doing an adaptation, I think this is the one that is probably the most likely to happen. Just because it's the what happened to Zuko's mom story. And because there's been like things about how that was maybe initially right after ATLA ended, planned as being an animated movie, but it never quite happened. So that's when it was more developed into a comic. They might want to come back around and make that clear. Because again, that's if you're focusing on Zuko post comics or anything like that, you're going to have to suddenly introduce to a lot of people who haven't read the comics that, hey, Ursa's right there. Like, Zuko has another sister. He has another, like, father figure, basically. There's a lot of stuff that book reveals that moviegoers might not be aware of if they haven't read that comic. So you either have to bring them up to speed with sort of flashbacks to The Search, or just do it directly itself. Because it's the only one that doesn't seem to be sort of like name of Avatar movie, and it's actually name of like the secondary main character movie, it kind of feels like, well, that's a really obvious one with Zuko. If it is not the adaptation, then, like I've said before, I think it's probably more, it's like Zuko and sort of the Fire Nation family story. And that this might be finally the one where they address what happens with Azula. Now, in that case, it maybe turns it more into the Azula movie, but Zuko's going to have to be involved. And I guess Zuko is maybe slightly more marketable because ATLA is very much the like Aang and Zuko show from more of a heavy marketing, I suppose, perspective. But that could work as well. Just to finally see what the path of Azula is going forward, especially if it's going to be set in the gap between shows and you have early Republic City, depending on how far you go, or still Cranefish. Because the interesting thing with the comics and Proto-Republic City is that we have not yet seen Zuko sort of like join in on that. We've seen Team Avatar minus Zuko do that. So we do still need to see the Fire Nation become involved in the sort of Cranefish project for the most part. So there's a few things they could do here, but I do lean towards it probably being more like Zuko and family, mainly Azula kind of story. But I think there's maybe the option for an adaptation with this one. But I still would ultimately think that adaptations are not really what they want to do. Korra movie. So this is the one where, like, I think the article directly says it will be after the end of the series. Now, I don't think there was really any other option, because if it's a Korra movie, it would suggest it's about Korra. Because the other options are like Red Lotus origin story, but I think that one would have been like rumored as Red Lotus origin rather than just Korra. Because that wouldn't involve Korra, that would be a full flashback kind of movie. So, what do they focus on with Korra? Well, the obvious one is that you basically take exactly what people want the next Korra comic to be and turn it into a movie. We finally go to the Fire Nation in Korra's era. We cover Izumi more. We have General Iroh back involved. Opportunity to introduce this like rumored Izumi's daughter character, the princess, and you just address and show what way the Fire Nation is 70 plus years on from the end of the war. How have things changed? because all we know really is just a few lines of dialogue that make it clear that Izumi, as a leader, doesn't want to bring the Fire Nation back into war and seems like a good leader who doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. But what's it actually like, island to island, and so on? Now, what would bring Korra to the Fire Nation? She could just go on like a public visit, state visit type thing. Just, I haven't really talked to you all that much, Izumi, so let's do it now. I think another option in terms of the thing I want future Korra to explore is Korra dealing with the human spirit conflict. She's the one who made this massive move to keep the sewer portals open, and I'd like to see her make progress in that regard, because we've seen other avatars who've attempted to do that and struggled or maybe made the situation worse. So I'd like to actually see Korra be one to maybe facilitate negotiations that actually lead to something, and I could maybe see that happening. The RPG game has teased that Wan Shi Tong is willing to give humanity another shot, and I think Korra negotiating with Wan Shi Tong and maybe some other spirits would very much open it up to something happening. Especially if, say, it's like Korra and Jinora leading like negotiations. That would be really cool to see. Now, there could be maybe spirit issues in the Fire Nation that maybe present the idea of like this is kind of what has to happen, because the Fire Nation, as far as we're aware, not super spiritual outside of like Bonte Island, so they wouldn't know maybe what to do with spirits, and that's why Korra is maybe called over. The brothers would have a very obvious thing to do in the Fire Nation, and that is to maybe visit the sort of Fire Nation side of their family, with their mother Naoki. So that would be very cool, because we obviously did the reverse in book 3 in Ba Sing Se. And then, Korra Asami, because of course if Korra is going to the Fire Nation, Asami's going to go as well, and you can develop their relationship there. Maybe Asami could assist with some technology type things if she absolutely has to. It depends on what exactly they want to do. But that'd be my initial thoughts. Otherwise, like if they're going to maybe do a bit of a time skip and maybe not just focus on the very broad issue of spirits, I'm not really sure where like a villain is going to come from, because you've already tackled a lot of things of like, I think people are a little tired of triad focused things, so they're not going to do that. I don't think they're going to make the movie The Return of Tokuga. If it is maybe spirit focused, there's maybe an option to bring him in, but I don't think he should be the focus. Did they make the movie like the second stage of Kuvira's story, incorporating Ruins of the Empire? I'm not sure. I'm not really sure about that. Did they use Zahir at all? I don't really think so. I think he's going to be just in jail, and maybe Korra will go to see him if she needs any sort of spiritual advice that maybe she feels he only has access to. It's tricky, do you bring back sort of the Bender non-Bender conflict? It feels like we're kind of a little bit far removed from that, and it might be tricky to sort of bring that back up again. Beyond that, it just kind of feels like you just have to introduce a whole new dynamic as such, because everything presented about it is that like the water tribes are on good terms because you effectively have the same family leading both tribes, so there shouldn't be an issue between the water tribes. Wu is doing a relatively good job as the Earth King now that he's kind of more accepted that role and is willing to give time to transition the Earth Kingdom into elected positions rather than having like a full-on Earth King. Izumi seems okay, and like she's not going to cause any real problems. Zhu Li, of course, is much more allied with Korra and our main character. So it feels like, unless you're really going to have one of these characters have a bit of an arc where they become a political like antagonist and cause an issue, things are relatively peaceful in the Korra era. So you kind of have to have like some sort of a rebel kind of group gang kind of rise up somewhere to make something happen. And they've already done like the Earth Kingdom thing with Kuvira. So it's a bit of a tricky one to know what exactly to do. I can maybe see some sort of a thing where like they're maybe subtly teasing the idea that Northerners who maybe want to keep things more traditional might rebel against Eska and Desna wanting to kind of move things forward, be more modern. but I'm not sure how much of a major conflict that would be. But a little bit more Water Tribe direct focus, I think, could be pretty good, and especially like focusing on the North as like they're the ones with major problems now, not just the place very capable of defending off an attack that we need to defend off an attack. So lots of options here. Because like going back to Kyoshi just for a second, remember she lives to be 230 years old, so you can choose to set a story wherever you want. You could tell like a very emotional story, like if you wanted, like absolutely like break the hearts of book readers. Like if you just set this in a place where like Kyoshi's like 100 years old, that suddenly means Rangi is gone, and Kyoshi still has like more than half of her life left and is potentially still looking like relatively young, and like she can just like have a second life if she has to. That would be a very interesting way to kind of play things if you want to just tell the story of like the sort of quote unquote eternal avatar, and that she feels she has to live this long to keep peace, but she loses people along the way, because we've already seen in the first two books that she's lost people. So it'd be kind of crazy to see that happen. So, I don't know. Lots and lots of options is the main thing here. Even for the very obvious 3 movies to do, there are so many things they could do. In that, like, you could very much do Kyoshi movie 2, Zuko movie 2, Korra movie 2, and you'd still have just as much material, in my mind. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are now that it seems like kind of all but confirmed, potentially, the lineup of movies. What do you expect from this? What are your thoughts on this is the plan? Are you surprised that they're going for Kyoshi first? Are you happy to see the Korra movie? I know a lot of people are excited about that, because Korra's been a little bit forgotten in her 10-year anniversary year. So this is a very good thing to see, that Korra is getting a bit of respect here by getting one of the first 3 movies. But let me know your thoughts, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.